Welcome to Peak Mind. I'm your host, Michael Trainer, and I'm extremely excited for this week's episode with the one and only Sarah PROUT. Sarah is a friend who I'm super inspired by because Sarah actually went from one of the most challenging lows, literally surviving an abusive relationship, a mother of 4 children, and she went from literally nothing and having to escape that context to amassing a community of millions of people around this notion of the journey to manifesting. And I've had some questions around the efficacy of manifesting, but this is someone who clearly demonstrated in her own life that she was working with some very profound tools. And so I was eager to sort of sit down with her and understand a little bit more of how you go from a really challenging low to a place where you've literally created a life of your dreams, because I think obviously that can be of service to everyone in this community. And so I asked her if she'd be willing to sit down, and she was gracious enough. A couple months ago, she actually sent me her book, which I highly recommend, and I basically started going through this notion of what I would see as sort of retooling your mindset and sowing the seeds for kind of a new garden of possibility. And I think you'll be blown away by the conversation. It was incredibly enlightening for me, and I've started to apply some of the tools and mindset kind of instructions that I garnered from Sarah. So I'm really excited for today's episode. Today's episode is brought to you by Foria Wellness. Foria is one of my favorite products. I reached out to the founder, Matt, who I've known for years, because I had done a bunch of research into CBD, because I kept seeing it pop up in the wellness community. But I also knew that as a kind of remediator of toxins from the soil, the quality of the product was essential. And so I reached out to Matt, who's one of the sort of most hardcore people I know in regards to purity and quality, and asked him about Foria and started using the product, use it on a daily basis, and love it. They have a full spectrum CBD blend called Basics that I absolutely love, and it uses all organic products, organic MCT oil, full spectrum aspects of the plant, and I've noticed a real consequence on my, just anytime I'm feeling a little bit anxious or just my overall well-being. So highly recommend you check them out. You can visit them at Foria, Foria wellness.com. And if you put in Peak, you can get 20% off any of their products. So check them out, ForiaWellness.com, Peak for 20% off. This episode is also brought to you by Thrive Probiotics. Thrive, I was really excited by because they've done clinical trials on their probiotics. And again, here's an instance where quality is definitive in efficacy. And they have an incredible probiotic, which I take daily, as well as it's also infused with antioxidants. And so I've been really impressed with their product and reached out to them, and they also offer to support the podcast and offer the community 15% off. So if you go to thriveprobiotic.com, which I'll link up below in the show notes, and put in Peak, you will also get 15% off your order. Check out their website as well. Really fascinating links to the various clinical trials they've done. And as we know, the gut is our enteric nervous system. It's our second brain and has profound consequences on our overall health and well-being. So check them out, Thrive Probiotic, and put in Peak for a discount. And without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Sarah PROUT.
All right, I'm here with the one and only Sarah PROUT. Sarah, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Michael. This is very exciting.
Yes, Sarah and I met not long ago, actually. She was in town for a Mind Valley conference here in Los Angeles, and we sat together for some time. And I just really enjoy your energy and your perspective. And she was gracious enough to send me her book, which I've delved deep into, and I'm going to talk about a little bit later. But we got on a call, and anyway, I'm very excited to have you on the show and to learn more, because to be frank, as a Midwesterner, this notion of manifestation is I wouldn't say it's a newer concept, but it's one I'm still wrapping my head around. And so it's exciting, especially given your background and experience, to speak with you today.
Yeah, I'm so excited as well. I mean, this is a great opportunity to showcase the possibilities.
Yeah, so for the benefit of our audience, one of the things that I resonated with the most, to be totally frank, was where you came from. And I think everyone can relate to the fact of having times in our life where we were, sort of besieged with challenges, and kind of where things may have felt hopeless, or we were really looking for kind of a lifeline. Can you take me back to sort of where you were before this whole journey of meditation and manifestation?
Sure. So I've always had an interest in meditation and the more mystical sides of life, but I found myself in a 10-year marriage that had the theme of domestic violence. So about 10 years ago, I left that toxic relationship behind me, and I had to get curious about being in survival mode, how I would cope, how I would face each day, how I would put food on the table for my 2 children. So when I was finally brave enough to leave, I left with nothing. I had 2 suitcases and over $30,000 worth of debt and 2 small children. So I was really in that fight or flight survival mode, where I was challenged to face each day with 2 options. It was either allow the fear to consume me, or figure out a more creative way to get curious about how I could attract the abundance that I needed to survive.
Wow. So heading back to that place, what were your first steps? Because I can relate. I haven't had an experience of domestic violence, nor could I really even really imagine what that would be like. I unfortunately, there are folks who have had those kinds of experiences, and one of my former partners had, and I think it's so powerful that you were able to lift yourself out and escape. First of all, I want to honor you for that, from a situation where you were not being honored. But in that context, especially with 2 children, which makes it even more complex and complicated, what were your first steps in really creating a new reality for yourself?
It was really out of necessity, and it was the awareness that I was in control of guiding my energy and my emotions. So when there were some days that there was nothing to feed the children, and so I felt powerless. But I had to get curious about what that lesson was teaching me. And I truly believe that necessity is the mother of all invention. And so you get creative when you are faced with limitations. And we know that throughout time, with artists in particular, some of the most brilliant artists worked with a very limited palette and very limited tools, but they came up with the most extraordinary masterpieces. So I decided, okay, I'm going to work with what I have, all of my faculties, the ones that I can see, and then the intangible ones as well, and see what ultimately manifests. So it began for me with gratitude and facing adversity with a sense of appreciation. And I know that sounds a bit sick and twisted, but when I was out on my own and I didn't have any food and I didn't have a fridge or a washing machine or any of those modern comforts, I felt so free, because if I allowed the fear to override what I was currently experiencing, then leaving meant nothing. And I couldn't do that to my children because I had to lead with the love that they needed to see.
Wow.
Yeah.
So powerful. A few things were evoked for me. One was, an extreme example, it reminded me of Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, and being in the most horrific of circumstance, but choosing to define your reality, and really that notion of personal agency as the ultimate freedom, something no one can take away from you. And I think it's so powerful that your why was so clear as it related to the love that you needed to demonstrate in terms of who you wanted to be for your children, that even regardless of circumstance, you defaulted back to that which we all can default to, which is gratitude. And it's almost impossible to be in a state of depression or judgment, etc., when you're going back and returning to gratitude. So such a powerful mindset. How were you able to build, if you will, sort of build the muscle, the new muscle of gratitude? And how did that wind up serving you as you started to sort of stack the bricks, if you will, for creating this new life?
That's a great question. It didn't happen every day. I want to be really clear that there were some days that I was so angry with life that I ended up in this situation. How did I allow this to go on for so long? There were the down days, but it was giving myself permission to feel whatever was coming up and not making it worse than it was, that I began to allow myself to get comfortable with the uncertainty. And this really formed the foundation of what I teach millions of people today, is that if you can face anything, if you can face uncertainty with a sense of trust and curiosity and conscious awareness and perspective, then you can literally survive anything that life throws at you.
So beautiful. So I like that you actually were like, kind of went real talk and like kept it up. You're like, well, not every day was I in gratitude. And I think I can relate to that. I think especially, there's this notion of sort of spiritual bypassing where it's like, and I know for myself, I had some latent anger from my own mistreatments in life that I kind of sort of just buried deep down, and finding a safe space in which to express some of those latent emotions, I think is integral, because if we deny them, ultimately they metastasize and manifest in ways that are not the healthiest in our bodies and systems. So I also think I love that you both went to gratitude, and also that you acknowledged that, hang on, real talk. I had some anger, I had some other things come up for me, and I was present with that. Okay, beautiful. So tell me a little bit more. You have these two kids. Are you in Australia at this point in time?
Yeah, I was living in Australia. I'd actually moved states, or I moved further up north to be by the beach. So I lived in like the worst house that was on a really beautiful street near the beach. So I lived in virtual poverty. I was living on less than $10 a day. So it was really scary. So we didn't have any heat. We didn't have any air conditioning when we needed it. And it was so beautiful though at the same time. And I look at that time in my life and think, oh my gosh, it was such a blessing that I was able to get there. And if I ask my kids now, hey, do you remember when we just had like ketchup sandwiches for a week at a time? They thought of it as an adventure. And I think the way that we represent the hardship as well is how it's framed up and remembered in our minds.
Wow. So what was your way of being, and what was the story you were sharing with your children? Because I mean, it's quite phenomenal that they look back and saw it with those eyes, as an adventure. What was your way of being during those times that you were able to create that frame such that they didn't see that hardship as a trauma, but rather as an adventure?
It was really a moment-by-moment basis. I remember I called up my mother and I said, look, Mum, I'm having a really tough time. What do I do? Because the banks are wanting money from me that I don't have, and they're going to switch the electricity off. And she said, just take one day at a time. And that was the philosophy that I still use to this very day, that just take one day at a time. Sometimes it was even one moment at a time, to take a breath and go, okay, this moment, I'm okay. I've got everything I need. I've got clean clothes on my back. I've got, my kids are safe. And it was just taking those micro moments of gratitude and working with them. So let's just say it started to rain and the kids and I had gone down to the store to buy some bread, and we didn't have a car or we didn't have an umbrella. We would make it an adventure to splash in the puddles and, laugh and giggle and just be together. And it's that presence of appreciation that we had that moment, and that's what we could work with.
It's beautiful. It evokes for me. There's a story. I don't know if you actually watched. There's two things that come up for me. One is there's this story of resilience where this book where this Navy SEAL tries to bring his friend who's basically descended into alcoholism after leaving the service. He basically tries to bring him back to life by reminding him of sort of who he was at his core. But he talks in that process about this notion of segmenting and just stacking, this exact sort of tool that you're sharing, I think, which is so valuable for the audience, which is, how do you stack one day, or if you need to, one moment at a time? And it also reminds me of this. I don't know if you ever heard the story of I think it's called Enter the Void. I'll remember the name of the film, but basically where this gentleman was left for dead at the top of a mountain after falling into a glacier, and literally had broken his femur in half, and was basically left for dead, and wound up climbing down. And the only way he was able to do it, I mean, if you can imagine walking down a mountain by yourself thinking that you were left for dead, was to break those steps down, which were obviously, each step would be excruciatingly painful, but to break those down into 10-foot increments. So his goal was literally just to make it the next 10 feet. And he was able to get down and actually wound up living and thriving. But I think that tool of segmenting and taking things a day at a time, and if necessary, a moment at a time, is one of the tools that I default back to, in addition to gratitude, whenever I'm sort of in a mental funk or need to start developing that new pathway towards a new future. So I loved it. I love that you did that. And so as you're in this new home with your children, what were the steps that you took to wind up getting back on your feet? Because I think, as someone who's also lost everything and gone into debt, I can relate to, it sometimes feels really daunting, and it's hard to maintain that mindset when you're besieged by challenges. And I know now you're in a very different place, but what was it that you started to do to stack or segment your days such that you started to dig yourself out of that hole and create this new reality?
That's a great question. So just rewinding a little bit to the reason why I left my first marriage, it was because I started to find my voice through connecting with other people on social media. So this was back in 2009, early 2010. And so when I found myself in my little apartment as a single mother on welfare, I had an internet connection and I had a laptop. And those two things were tools that I could use to ultimately pave my new way to freedom. So I was sharing my struggles. I wasn't sharing all of them, so I was still really good at putting on my brave face and saying, everything's okay. But I was connecting with people and teaching them about how to use their voice authentically on social media. And so back in 2009, I had over 20,000 followers on Twitter. And they were all attracted to me because I was connecting with people, I was conversing, and slowly I began to build this following. And through being vulnerable and sharing and being of service to other people, I started to see, okay, maybe I could turn this into a way of making money. And so I was teaching people how they could optimize more authentic influence on their websites. And that was a way that I started to get a little bit of a cash flow. And I was connecting with a friend of mine that I'd met on Twitter who lived in Hollywood at the time. And then it was like a light switch went off, and we were friends for about a year. And he flew out from Hollywood to Australia for an 11-day blind date, and he never left. He became my husband and my business partner, and he didn't have a penny to his name. He used all the money he had in the world to fly out to Australia to be with me. And we decided, okay, how am I going to split my welfare check, that $10 a day, just a little bit further for one more mouth to feed? And we had to get creative. So we put our heads together and we created a business. And the first invention of my brand was actually a publishing company. So slowly but surely, we created a compilation book model where people would pay us to have their stories put in a book that we would compile. And we had teachers from The Secret that donated chapters. And I think the first year we did $80,000. And then the second year we did $250,000. And I just remember that day I had to call up the welfare office and say, hey, you can keep your checks. I'm okay now. It was the best full circle moment of, okay, I got myself out of this. And it was such a beautiful opportunity in a new relationship where I was processing the trauma of my previous 10 years and getting divorced and all of that kind of thing. and being with this man who was showing up to love me unconditionally, because I believe that we came together to serve a greater mission and vision in the world. And so he was my ultimate reward from the universe for the bravery that I had to lead that 10 years.
Beautiful. Yeah, and you mentioned the universe, and I know, your book is Dear Universe, and you sort of in your process really call out to this notion of something beyond the self, right? You're not saying Dear Sarah. It's Dear Universe. So I started to go into it. I was grateful that you sent it to me, and to speak plainly as a Midwesterner, this notion of manifestation and speaking out to the universe, it's not foreign to me by any means, but it's still something, I think, like many people, that I'm really coming to terms with, because all of us obviously have grown up with this particular notion of reality as defined by sort of our school systems, based in the scientific method or what have you, but yet also see these moments of things coming into our life and synchronicities or whatnot that seemingly have no correlation and appear to be magic. And so this notion of manifestation has occurred to me as really interesting, especially as I've deepened my meditation practice, because what I've found is that as my mindset has shifted, I don't know if you can call it manifestation, but as my mindset has shifted, things have occurred to me or come to me with greater ease. And to me, it's this notion of, and I have really embraced this notion of alignment, right? So to me, that's how am I acting in congruence with my vision and my values? And I find that as I am in alignment, the world unfolds to me, or the universe unfolds to me in really beautiful ways with really incredible opportunities. Small case in point, right after I saw you, I hosted a dinner party for which there was no personal agenda or benefit. And there were times at which I wanted to give up because I didn't know if the co-host and I were entirely aligned in our mission. But I decided, I gave my word and I would stick it through. And at that dinner came the founder of Upgrade Labs. And we wound up hitting it off. And then this past weekend, he actually invited me as his guest. And I cannot tell you, Sarah, the number of people that I met there and the ways in which I think it will ultimately change my life. But that came for me from a process of being my word, which is one of my values, and being in alignment. And so I don't know if that's manifesting, but I'd love to get a greater understanding for folks like myself who may not be deeply entrenched in this world on what it means to, if you will, manifest and how that whole process works.
Okay. That's another great question. Oh, this is really fun. So there is this beautiful bridge, I believe, between science and spirituality. And I believe that everything that unfolds in your reality is a manifestation. So a manifestation is the ability to take your next breath, to blink your eyelids, to move your body, and then to have your awareness that you can perceive the world around you in a way that you choose. So you can guide your energy and your emotions. That's my perspective on manifesting. A lot of other law of attraction and manifesting teachers out there believe that thoughts become things. Whereas through my work over the last 10 years and my nearly 40 years on this planet, it's really apparent to me that our emotions are what manifests, that our emotions are the manifestations. And this brings me back to my work in Dear Universe and the 200 emotions that are listed in there that invite people to tune into how they're feeling, so that that alignment piece can come in that you just said, that when we attract, when our energy is high, you might have heard people talking about the vibes being high, or good vibes, bad vibes, low vibes. Yeah. Well, that's just a reminder, and I know it's a buzz phrase in a lot of spiritual communities, but that's just a way of saying that everything is energy. There is nothing on this planet, seen or unseen, that isn't energetic at its core source, its core nature. If you put anything under a powerful enough microscope, it's moving. We live in a literal ocean of motion, I like to call it, because everything's buzzing and oscillating at a specific frequency. So whether it's your thoughts, your feelings, a rock, a teaspoon, whatever it is, it's all vibrating. And the way it works is that the like energy, at the atomic level, is attracted to each other. So this is the law of attraction. It clumps together and it creates an outcome. So you may have heard before, birds of a feather flock together. It's the same with energy. And so when you are vibrating at a specific frequency, or your energy is fixated at a certain point, then you will attract that into your experience. And we know this because in our brains, we're wired to look for things that are brought to our attention. So, for example, if I say to you, look for things around your room like right now that are the color blue, you're going to see all of the blue things standing out because it's been activated in a part of your brain called the reticular activating system. So, like, it's the awareness that you bring to it, though. So, so much meaning, though, in the spiritual community has been placed on things that actually have no importance whatsoever. And I say that very flippantly and tongue-in-cheek, very playfully, because it's true. We get so attached to wanting to understand the bigger mysteries of life, but what if they don't matter? What if the real point is being here now? What if we don't have to figure out what certain signs mean, or, whether we're destined to meet our soulmate? What if our sole responsibility was to take ownership of how we feel in each moment? Because I can tell you, through the thousands upon thousands of people I've worked with over the years, the failure of relationships, or not having a life that has meaning, or addictions, and I know that's a much bigger conversation, it all stems from not taking ownership and allowing yourself to feel whatever's coming up.
Wow.
It's a big conversation.
I so resonate with that, because this notion of following your feelings. I remember when I moved from New York, I moved to Los Angeles. I had left a previous chapter, which was highly enriching in a variety of ways, intellectually stimulating, societally kind of appreciated and approved. But I didn't feel entirely aligned and at integrity with sort of life at the time. And I was holding my friend's beautiful newborn son. And I was amidst, as many of us, fall into this period of transition. And he asked me a very potent question. And this is these are wonderful friends to have, because my friend Eric, he doesn't, he always says what's on his mind and speaks his truth, even and especially when it's uncomfortable. But in that particular moment, he said, "How do you want to feel every day?" Yeah. And I don't know why that particular question hit me the way it did, but they're holding his newborn son and thinking about ultimately becoming a father, if I'm lucky enough one day, and ultimately feeling that sense of love. To me, that feeling was the most important, and that ultimately is actually what led me to come out to LA, which for me was a feeling of being connected to nature and being in a healthier environment and being more aligned to some of the ways in which, frankly, I wanted to feel, being able to go in the ocean every day, which makes me feel alive, and so, there's that quote, which I love, by Howard Thurman, which is, "Don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive, and go do that," because what the world really needs is for people to come alive. And I feel like following your feeling is a really clear indicator of what makes you come alive. And so, the piece that I haven't been able to get down with in the law of attraction is this notion of, if you just think about something, it's going to happen, right? Because it's like, I know plenty of people here in Venice, California, that are sitting on their couches thinking about things, and it definitely isn't manifesting. So can you delve a little deeper into this notion of feeling, and how, if you align your heart, which to me feeling comes from, at least in my mind, it comes from the heart, although with the new science around our enteric nervous systems and this notion of following your gut, and the gut being the second brain, perhaps it's a more holistic consideration. But for the purposes of our conversation, this notion of alignment of gut, head, and heart, how that plays in manifestation.
Oh, I love that. I think that the gut is actually the second heart. So it's like not so much the brain, but the gut, because it's those gut feelings that are telling you all the time. It's this beautiful feedback system that, for every action is a reaction, for every intention there's an answer. that shows up and manifests into your reality. And the key piece, especially in the personal development, self-help industry, we're fed this notion that if you have a negative feeling, then you sweep it under the rug. You don't give it any attention. You don't look at it. Let's just pretend it doesn't exist. It's the big pink elephant in the corner of the room. But what if you showed up to that negative emotion with a sense of compassion and curiosity? What if you softened that experience and then you moved through that? And so in terms of blockages in the flow of what's possible to manifest, it's showing up to that adversity, that negativity, or that shadow side of life with that sense of curiosity. So from what I found in my experience, the overriding beauty of feelings becoming your reality is that you need to be open to all possibilities. So when you're creating that vision board, and I'm not sure whether your listeners right now have created vision boards or not, but it's very much focused on the materialistic for most people when it comes to vision boards, what the soulmate looks like, or what the dream house looks like, or their sports car. But it's not how you feel when you are immersed in that reality. So it's very important to feel your way to success and to feel successful right now, because the most pivotal point of power anybody has is right now in this moment. Because the next one, who knows whether we're going to be granted or blessed with the next one? You don't know. Nobody knows.
Wow. So you evoked a conversation I had you just brought it right up to the surface, where someone asked me, what are the traits of your ideal partner, right? Which I think anyone can relate to, no matter where you are, if you're single, if you're with your partner. And I had done the exercises and written down. I probably had almost like a 3-page list of all the things my intellect wanted in my ideal partner. And it was asked by a gentleman who was very clearly in a very loving relationship that lit him up, and he listened intently. Gave me my space to sort of share my thoughts, which frankly were wonderful thoughts. But what he said next was so enlightening to me. And he said, "That sounds beautiful. I don't know about all that, but what I can tell you is that with my partner, when she walks in the room, the whole room comes alive. Every night before I go to sleep and every morning when I wake up, we're laughing." And it was such a powerful statement, because what it evoked for me was the feeling, right? It wasn't this, 6 feet tall or whatever, intelligent, it wasn't this, this whole list. It was the feeling of oh yeah, what would it be like to be with someone who made you laugh? And what I've seen with my dad have been together almost 50 years, and it's not, frankly, sexy at this point in time in their life. But one of the things I admire most about my mother is she has my dad's back unequivocally, even as he contends with dementia. And I think that feeling of knowing someone has your back. So what you say about that feeling, to me, it really resonates and makes so much sense. And so I think many of us, there was a couple, as I was preparing for our time together, there were 2 core areas and I spoke to a couple of friends that I think many of us are really, really keen on as it relates to, if you will, manifesting in our lives. And one is around partnership and the potentiality of romantic partnership and our ideal partner. Maybe the biggest decision we make in our lives is who we choose to spend our life with. And the second would be, and I'm very curious about this given your personal experience, and forgive me for asking 2 questions at once, you can approach it however you like, but would be, how did you go from tens of thousands of dollars in debt to now, as I understand it, running a multi-million-dollar company? What is it that enables the financial manifestation and abundance? And I know that is not without work, by the way. I know that's not just sitting in the corner thinking about being building abundance. But those 2 areas, if you can sort of delve deeply into manifestation as it relates to partnership and manifestation as it relates to financial abundance, I would love it.
Okay. Oh, these are great questions. Okay, so manifestation in relationship to the love aspect of your purpose here on earth is that we grow through relationships. So we ultimately want to be open to attracting somebody that we can create this beautiful mutual support system. I feel like this is so often overlooked, that as a partner, you're willing to put your hand up and say, hey, universe, God, whatever you call it, life, I'm here, I'm showing up, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to feel good in this moment. And when you say, you've got 2 pages or whatever of the attributes of this mystical soulmate that's out there somewhere, you have to be very careful that it's not creating rules around it. Because if that person shows up and they're like 2 inches shorter or not blonde or brunette or whatever it is, then you shut yourself off to potentially seeing that as an option. And like I say, manifestation is about being open to all possibilities. And since we're here on earth to learn and to grow and to expand in consciousness as human beings, we're going to get tested. And I found this with my own rules about attracting love, because when I was single, I vowed that I would never date a younger man. There was no way in the world I would date a younger man. I just knew that that's not what I wanted. And on all my lists, my vision board, everything that I had, believed, I thought no younger man. And then Sean, my husband, shows up and he's 5 years younger than me. And I said no to that. I wouldn't be, nearly 6 years married to this man and raising 4 beautiful children. So it's getting curious about our own blind spots. Like, where are areas in our lives that we need to open up more? And then that edges you closer. The other thing is to switch the perspective on the soulmate relationship. So often we're so focused on finding our one, right? What if we flip the perspective and we thought about where our one is out there in the world that's waiting for us? How can we prepare ourselves right now to be the best version of who we are going to be in a partnership, in a sacred union? And when you make that switch and you're thinking about that person out there and you're creating space in your own life to share your life in union with somebody else, then you'll watch that magic happen. So that's one part of it. Like I said, I could talk about this for hours.
I want to keep asking. Yes, I feel like you could, but it's so valuable because it's like it's so central to, I think, what so many of us yearn for. And what you're saying, it's interesting. It's like what you said earlier, right? If you program my mind to say, look for the color blue, and I look around my room, I'll see the color blue. Well, if I write down a list of let's call it 100 prerequisites, well, I'm not going to see anyone in that field who doesn't fit those 100 prerequisites, which means basically I likely will bypass over my person potentially, because I've so narrowed my scope of what I'm looking for, as opposed to, as I'm hearing you, and please correct me if I'm wrong or if it spurns any insight, but as opposed to really what is that feeling and what's the life you want to create, and who would be the ideal person to partner in the co-creation of that life.
It's a sacred contract that you both enter into. So, and again, it comes back to that word that you used before, alignment.
Yeah.
And how you can bring out the best version of each other, and how you can support each other and nurture that relationship. And then, like you said, the manifestation of becoming a parent one day, and how that brings in a completely different dynamic as well, and the relationship changes. And so the second part of your question about abundance and allowing that flow of abundance, the answer to both questions, whether it's manifesting and attracting a relationship or financial freedom and abundance, actually resides in the same statement, and that is this: that it all boils down to being of service to another human being or other human beings, and impact. So it actually has nothing to do with you. It's more about how you show up and you transform the world and you make it a better place. So it's all about that love. So with the abundance, of course, you're not just going to sit on a mountaintop and expect $1 million to land in your bank account. The way that I have manifested my abundance is by having the intention to change lives. And that's where my heart lies. I don't care whether there's $1 million there or not. I'm all about the lives that are changed, or the women that email me and say, Sarah, you gave me the courage to leave my abusive relationship. When I was at that Mind Valley event that you mentioned earlier, a woman came up to me and she showed me a picture of her 3-year-old son. And she said that had she not stumbled upon my blog or a blog article that I wrote, that her son would have to witness physical violence for the rest of his childhood.
Oh my God.
And I just felt so humble in that moment that the work makes a difference, and that my vulnerability was the key to my freedom and ultimately my financial abundance.
It evokes for me that notion of what if we, instead of sort of exalting the billionaires in the world, those who have amassed the greatest material wealth, we exalted the billionaires in the sense of those who could potentially impact the lives of 1 billion people. And that notion of valuing impact and service is so resonant to me and my sensibilities. I love that. So, but to take it from the why, if you will, or the value, which is so rich of how can you serve, for those who may be, and I think this is one of the, I don't know if epidemic's the right word, epidemics of our time, people feeling that they're not on purpose, or they haven't found their why, they haven't found their gift in the world, their unique path. What are the tools that people can use to get clear, if you will, on what's in alignment for them in their highest service, so from that place they can attract that abundance?
Again, it boils down to that place of love. What do you love to do? How do you lose time? What activity could you do time and time again, and you can show up with a sense of enthusiasm and creativity and inspiration? And everybody has a story to share. And that's what's really beautiful, that we all have the capacity to teach and uplift other people. And it doesn't have to take much either. So many people think that philanthropy begins with writing out a giant check, but it could be donating clothes that you haven't worn in a little while, or going down to a soup kitchen, or sharing somebody's post on social media. Anything, just so it takes it again to that micro moment. What can I do now? How can I show up and be of service? And the other thing, Michael, that I really want to express here is that we take ourselves way too seriously. that we all think that we are all so wrapped up in what other people think about us.
Yeah.
And it's a hurdle. It's a hindrance. It stops us from being the best versions of ourselves when we're too caught up in our minds of how am I being perceived? Am I being perfect enough? Am I as good as her or him? Or, and it's a waste of time. It's a total waste of time.
So true. I mean, I just did a podcast recently with a friend, Mark, and, he asked me sort of, it's all about authenticity. And, he was like, what's the vulnerable share that you can put out there? And ostensibly for me, it was that, it was like I moved from Global Citizen which was, this big, beautiful work in the world, but no longer, when my dad was diagnosed with dementia, no longer felt like my work, and it was in good stead. But to birth that next chapter, which for me, in part evoked by my dad's dementia, was much more about, wellness and the work within, if you will, in addition to the work without. It felt like, wow, this felt like a massive step down. It was like my ego is like, oh man, this is like, I'm taking a massive step down. And it was interesting because it was, I read Elizabeth Gilbert's book, Big Magic. Have you read that book?
I have. It's beside my bed.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. But it was her story of it was two things. One was her story, where she talks about writing Eat, Pray, Love, which obviously, as many of us know, turned into this smash, phenomenon. And she was like, well, how am I going to replicate that? So you don't replicate that success. And you'd be hindered from ever doing anything again if you expected what you had to do next to be bigger. And so she talks about that ultimately we're just vessels, and how do we let whatever needs to be birthed through us be born? And maybe that's a cookbook or a coloring book, she said. And I was like, wow, okay, so intellectually I got it there, but it was, and I know you'll resonate with this because in listening to some of your work, you and I sort of reference the same sort of metaphor, but I was actually at a Fleetwood Mac concert in December, and I was watching this tribute to Tom Petty, and I always loved Tom Petty. I had the option. A friend of mine was hosting a festival that he was performing at. It was literally a phone call away, and I thought, oh no, I'll check him out next year. And of course, he passed away, and I never got to see Tom Petty. And it was in that concert that I thought, my God, well, one, here's a man who sang his music, but two, I don't want to die with my music still in me. And some opportunities pass you by if you don't seize them. And it was literally at that show where I was like, I'm going to sing my song. It doesn't matter how many people show up to the performance, but I'm going to put it out there. Because I had been recording my podcast for, and I was embarrassed to admit this, over 3 years, almost 4 years, but had never published the episode because I was afraid of what people would think. So to bring it full circle, it was like the liberation in sort of surrendering that and being like, all right, doesn't matter. Let's just put it out there because my hope is it's of service. And now even, it's a new release, but just the feedback that I've been getting, and it's such a liberating thing to transcend that concern and take ourselves, as you said, take ourselves so seriously and put ourselves on the field, and I can't remember that famous quote, but it's like, it's not the critic that counts. It's the man or woman on the field, basically doing their thing and singing their song. So I so resonate with that. And thank you for bringing that up. How do you stay in that process? Like, because all of us are human and we get to a place where, we might start thinking about, we got a critique, whether it be on your podcast or someone says something negative to you. What do you find, what's your process of coming back to who you are and being in this moment, as you said, which is invaluable? What are your tools for coming back when you feel thrown off by someone else's feedback, energy, critique, what have you?
Oh, that's a great question. It's taken me a long time to allow myself this space to feel this way. And I still, in all honesty and transparency, I still feel that way sometimes. I get triggered if it's a negative comment or somebody doesn't like something I create. But ultimately, I have to remind myself that what other people think of me is none of my business. It's a projection of where they're at that point in time. It's like that book, The Four Agreements. The first agreement is not to take things personally. Yep. And so I try my best not to. But in terms of like Elizabeth Gilbert not knowing whether her next book's going to be a bestseller as big as Eat, Pray, Love, my children are such a grounding force in my life. And I didn't have the next child to say, oh, well, I hope this one's better than the last one.
Oh, so beautiful. Yeah, exactly. You would never think like that.
Like, oh my God, those other three, they were pretty ugly. Let's hope this one's a good one. So I kept trying. But it's not that way because I realized that whatever shows up is perfect and it has a lesson to teach me. And all of my children are very different, and they all have these different ways of showing up and almost dismantling my ego.
Yeah.
And it happens in my relationship too. Like it's not always laughter and, first thing in the morning, last thing at night, laughter. It's great to have that with somebody. But that's my reminder that you can't take any of this with you when you leave the planet. You can't. We just shuffle up. It's those feelings, it's those memories, it's the love, and that's all that matters. It's not the negative comments. I'm not going to get to my deathbed one day and go, oh my God, that person gave me a thumbs down on YouTube.
It's such a good relief.
Next life I'll come back and I'll change their mind for them. It doesn't work like that.
It's such a good relief to think about things, I think, from the perspective, although at times it can feel a little bit morose, but of your deathbed, and thinking about like, my God, any challenge. One thing I've been playing with, and I knew this intellectually, but I've been really trying to play with it beyond just the intellect and take it as dharma or as truth, which is that notion that everything is happening for us rather than to us. And so especially, all of us have unfortunately had traumas or challenges or, people have done or done things that were, not right. But instead of getting, which is tempting because you can get fed off the narrative of victimhood. And by the way, this is in no way to mitigate against those who are going through, profound challenges in life. It's simply to say, I think there is something so powerful when, in addition to taking the necessary action around removing yourself from that context, circumstance, environment, person, what have you, in processing it, starting to see some of the challenges as an opportunity for, if you will, compost to create, to turn that, pardon me, but shit into, the fertilizer for new gardens and a new way of being and a new form of living. And when I look back on life, it's right. It's not those those traumas or those critics that I'll be thinking of. It's, who's in my garden? Who did I grow with? What kind of experiences? How did we fertilize each other's soil, so to speak, in terms of like adding value to each other's lives? And what and how much laughter, again, to bring it back to that partnership piece that I realized was so important to me, how much laughter and grace and goodwill did we sort of share in each other's lives? Because to me, that's the measure of a good life. That may not be the measure for everyone, but I don't really care if I ever have a Lamborghini in my garage, but I care a lot about did I leave the world a slightly better place than I came into it, and did I dance and have fun? I'm all over the place with my metaphors, but did I dance and have fun with those that meant the most to me? So I love how you put that.
Oh, thank you. Well, I nearly died in 2015.
Oh,
and that
wow.
was really a turning point for me to go, okay, you may not have survived that. So
yeah, what happened, and how was it a relief? Because my own near-death experience totally changed me. How did it wake you up, so to speak?
It woke me up in the sense that that this life isn't a dress rehearsal. That we think we have an indefinite amount of time, and perhaps we don't. So I was giving birth. I had a C-section, and the anesthetic wore off, and so I could feel everything from the waist down, and my body went into shock, and I began to lose a lot of blood quickly, and all of a sudden I, started to transition, and that's a conversation for another day for sure. But it was hit and miss. Like, I didn't know whether I was going to survive or not, and then I woke up, and I was very grateful that I had made it through to the other side, coming back to my body into the earth plane. And I realized that, okay, this whole life thing can be taken away from you in the blink of an eye.
Wow.
And that's, it's such a gift and it takes it back to that day by day. I still live this lesson day by day, moment by moment, that it's all such a beautiful gift.
So powerful. First of all, I want to acknowledge you, and I want to acknowledge all the moms out there. My mom also was told that she had 2 minutes to live because I had my umbilical cord wrapped around my neck. So,
so did I when I was born. That's
no
weird.
way.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Emergency C-section. The doctor was like, you've got 2 minutes, or I would pass away and she would pass away, and so. Just shout out to all the moms out there, because what you all go through to bring us into the world is so, man, I just have so much respect and admiration for. And it's powerful that you had that experience during your C-section, because that was, I don't remember it consciously, but that was my first, I had a near-death experience before even coming into the world. So it was, It is a reckoning when you think, man, this could have all come to pass without having the great gift that is the dance through this lifetime. I mean, even with the challenges, and maybe even especially with the challenges, what a powerful opportunity to just relish in this life, which is a gift.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Oh my gosh. We went through the same thing.
I can't believe it.
That's great.
It's
That's
wild.
Crazy. That was my first experience, a near-death experience.
Yeah. Well, I suppose all birth is, in a way, right? Birth and death are these ultimate transition moments. Well, I don't know what's on the other side yet, but it's this, the biggest transitions, and the relief that they are in terms of what they can remind us in terms of how we live our lives. And with that, I know I want to be mindful of your time.
Sure.
But I have a couple final questions. And one is this notion of, if you had one or two, and this can be, it can be a variety of things. So it can be a people, it can be a book, it can be any tool. So if you had one or two tools, people, thoughts that you felt could be of greatest service to the audience in this moment, doesn't have to be, the perfect answer, but what's evoked from you from this conversation, and what do you think could be the greatest service to the audience in terms of two things, people, tools that are up for you right now?
Okay. first tool, and this will always be my favorite tool in my spiritual toolbox, is joy. Because I believe that joy is the currency of consciousness. So do as many things that bring you joy as possible. So, and it doesn't have to be much. You could, turn on some music and dance around your kitchen, or have a warm bath or a nice cup of tea, but bring joy to the moment. That is like the ultimate spiritual goal.
It is.
So,
to get all caught up in all the
so
seriousness. It really is. Children are great. Great teachers. Joy is the truth.
Yeah, joy is the truth. And then the second tool is, let's see. So joy and laughter go hand in hand, I believe. This is really tough. Service. How can you be of service to others and humanity? How can you show up rather than thinking, what can you get from people? Always switch it around. And I don't use universals very often, or absolutes, but always ask yourself, how can I show up and give to this person or these people or this planet?
Yeah. Leading with giving. It's also basically one of the best ways to get out of, if you're in a funk or in a challenging situation, the fastest way out, in addition to a gratitude practice, is to focus out, to be in service, to go and give. That'll pull you out. I remember sometimes if I'm in being at a coffee shop and I'm in a bad mood, the first thing I'll do is I'll buy the person behind me a coffee, or if you go volunteer, all those things, just being of service and creating moments of focusing beyond you. It's such powerful medicine.
It really is. It really is. It changes everything.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And so okay, that's beautiful. What about a book or two? Are there one or two books that you think are really powerful teachers that you've read lately or just gotten very excited by?
Oh, there's so many, so many books. Okay, let's see. Man's Search for Meaning, you mentioned that earlier, Viktor Frankl. Yes. I think is an absolute timeless classic that needs to be read. And there's this book called The Impersonal Life. I think it was, it's a small spiritual text. I can't even remember who the author is. It's a very obscure book about how the universe works through us as us. And they're really my top two favorites right now that I can think of. There are hundreds. I have a mental library right now of all of these books when you get to the front of my brain to go, pick me. That's my top two for the book club right now.
Well, I'm excited for our next conversation and you and I sharing a little bit more of our favorite books. I will say, you mentioned having Big Magic on your bedside table.
Yes.
I actually have your book, Dear Universe, next to mine because, well, one, you were so gracious to send it to me, but two, one of the things I've been looking to do is to sort of turn off my screens, and I've been putting on my nighttime glasses to block out the blue light, but also reinvigorating my practice of reading at night before bed, and sort of one of my tricks to getting into peak mind is turning off from the technological world and turning into our inner world. And your book has been a real insight in that regard, because you can kind of approach it in chunks, which I love. So definitely recommend people check out Dear Universe. And where Sarah, because we've had such a rich conversation, where can people find you online?
Just my website, which is sarahprout.com, or I spend a lot of time over on Instagram, Sarah Prout, or Love Sarah Prout on Facebook.
Amazing. And you build an incredible, one of these days, maybe our next conversation, we'll find out how you built this whole universe, but got almost 1 million followers on Facebook. You've really just built this incredible group, and I know it's from a place of service. So I just want to honor you for really, taking your life to the next level. So much of the entrepreneurial culture is about leveling up, and I don't get that I've never gotten the sense from you that it was about sort of this leveling up, but what a manifestation in terms of a testimonial to go from, really, being down in debt, which I can totally relate to, and then now building this, this both financially very abundant universe, but one that serves millions of people around the world, and doing so from a place of why, and doing so in joy, and doing so in service to your beautiful 4 children. I just want to honor you, Sarah Prout, for how you showed up in the world and the way that you're dancing. So I'm so grateful for you and for this conversation.
Oh, thank you, Michael.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Hopefully it won't be our last.
Not at all. I'm so looking forward to connecting again very soon.
Yes, indeed. All right, so everyone go out and check out Sarah Prout. And Sarah, until next time, thanks for being on Peak Mind.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye for now.
Bye.
And there you have it. Really incredible conversation with Sarah Prout. Absolutely loved talking with her. Super inspired by anyone that can transcend circumstance, especially incredibly challenging circumstance, and recreate their life anew. I think it's an impetus for us all to really assess ways in which we can manifest our lives in a way that is truly in accordance with our vision and values. So I hope you got a lot of value out of it. If you did, please go ahead and leave a rating and review on iTunes, and go check out Sarah Prout's podcast as well. I just did an episode on it, and I think it's really valuable. I'll link that up below in the show notes. And, as always, feel free to give feedback. You can hit me up at michael@peakmind.org. This community means the world to me, and I'm so grateful for your time and attention. And with that, please go out there and live your inspired life.